She raised a hand. The team froze. She pointed to the left. A guard patrol moved along the ridge above them. Their footsteps were audible in the still air. They carried lanterns that cast weak yellow circles of light. Emily waited until they passed. She guided the team through a narrow gap in the rocks. It was a path invisible to anyone who didn't know it was there. They slipped past the outer sensor line without a single alert. The slave camp lay ahead. High fences, watchtowers, the air carried a foul smell. Unwashed bodies, waste, fear. It was a physical weight. They moved along the perimeter using the shadows. Emily pointed to a section of fence near a rocky outcrop. The ground was loose scree. She knelt, moving stones aside. A narrow opening appeared. A natural crack in the rock widened by time. It led under the fence. One by one, they crawled through. Inside, the stench was overwhelming. Long, low barracks lined a muddy central yard. Guards stood at intervals, their postures bored but alert. Emily's eyes scanned the compound. She pointed to the farthest building. It was smaller, more heavily guarded. A punishment block. They moved silently along the edges, using the barracks for cover. A guard turned. Jack moved fast. His arm went around the man's throat. A quick, tight pressure. The guard went limp. They dragged him into the shadows. The door to the punishment block was locked. Torres used a cutting tool on the hinge. The metal glowed red, then gave way. The door swung inward. The room inside was dark. A single figure lay on a low cot. She was thin. Her blue skin was dull in the dim light, but her eyes, when they opened, were sharp. They held no surrender. Emily stepped forward. Mother. The word was a breath. Sarah's composure cracked for a single second. Her hand touched Emily's face. Then the moment was gone. She stood, her movements stiff but determined. They moved back toward the fence line. They were almost to the crack in the rock when a shout rang out. An alarm began to blare, a harsh electronic scream. Lights flooded the compound. Guards poured from the barracks, weapons ready. They were cut off. The way back was blocked. Pulse rifle fire tore up the ground around them. They took cover behind a storage crate. The return fire was intense. Torres laid down covering fire. Jack tried to find an angle. There were too many. They were pinned. The guards began to advance using overlapping fields of fire. Sarah's hand gripped Emily's arm. Her voice was low, urgent. The caves. She pointed not toward the fence, but toward the center of the compound, to a large drainage grate set in the ground. The river runs beneath us. The grate leads to the old channels. Their escape was not back the way they came. It was down, into the darkness under the camp itself. Jack pried the grate up with his knife. The opening was narrow, black. It smelled of damp earth and running water. They dropped into the void, one after another, as gunfire sparked against the metal above them. The descent into the cave was a drop into absolute black. The air changed instantly. Gone was the metallic stink of the camp. It was replaced by the smell of wet stone and cold running water. The passage was narrow. Their shoulders scraped against rough limestone walls. The ceiling was low. They moved in a crouch. The only light came from Jack's hand lamp, its beam a shaky circle on the damp rock ahead. Sarah moved to the front. Her hand touched the wall. She wasn't looking at the light. She was reading the stone itself. Her fingers traced the flow of mineral deposits. She noted the sound of water echoing from different directions. This was not a random hole in the ground. It was a mapped place for her people, a network used for generations to escape the planet's harsh surface storms. She chose a fork in the passage without hesitation. Her steps were sure on the uneven floor. The cave was a complex system. Tunnels branched off into darkness. Some led to dead ends. Others dropped into deep pits. Sarah knew the path. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone walking a well-known road. The sounds from above faded quickly. The shouts of the guards, the blare of the alarm, it all dissolved into a muffled hum, then nothing. The stone absorbed it. The maze of tunnels confused any pursuit. Dre's men would not follow them down here. They didn't have the maps. They walked for what felt like hours. The air grew colder. The sound of water grew louder. They came to a wide underground river. It flowed swiftly in the dark, its surface a murky black. A narrow natural ledge ran along one side. They followed it single file, their hands on the cold wall for balance. The darkness was a physical pressure. The only sounds were their breathing and the rush of water. Then a faint light appeared ahead. A pinprick of gray that grew steadily. Fresh air brushed their faces. It smelled of dust and the dry plants of the Kepleron plain. They emerged from a crack in a low cliff face, blinking in the weak sunlight. They were miles from the slave camp. The eastern territory stretched out before them, empty and silent. The danger was behind them. Sarah stood for a moment, her face turned to the sky. She drew a slow, deep breath. Then she turned to her children. She didn't hug them. She placed a hand on each of their shoulders, her touch firm. Her eyes moved over their faces, taking them in. The gratitude in her look was quiet but immense. It was in the set of her jaw, the slight softening around her eyes. She saw they were safe. She saw they were whole. Her pride was a solid, unspoken thing. The journey back to the colony would be long. They had no vehicle. They had to cross open ground on foot. But they had water from the cave. They had their freedom. The family was together again. Jack and Torres took point, scanning the horizon for any sign of Dre's patrols. The children walked with their mother in the center of the group. For the first time since they had asked for scraps in the clearing, they were complete. The hardest part was over. Now they just had to get home. The entire colony gathered in the central square. It was the same space where fear had been shouted weeks before. Now the mood was different. Cautious. Watchful. Sarah stood with her children near the council table. Her posture was straight. Her blue skin held a healthier glow. She had recovered some strength, but the marks of her imprisonment were still there, in the set of her shoulders. In the careful way she held her hands, she looked at the faces around her. Colonists who had argued for her children's expulsion. People who had feared them. She didn't speak first. She waited. The silence stretched. It was a fragile moment. She was an unknown, a leader of a people they didn't understand. When she finally spoke, her voice was clear. It carried without effort. "Thank you for keeping my children safe." Her words were simple. There was no pleading in them. No request for more. Just a statement of fact. A recognition of what had been done. "They told me what you did. The food, the shelter, the protection." She looked at Jack, at Torres, at Martha Chen. Her gaze included them all. "You had every reason to turn them away. You did not. That is a debt I will not forget." She spoke of survival, not as a human concept, not as an alien one. As a shared necessity. On this world, isolation is a death sentence. Cooperation is the only strategy that works. My people learned this. Now you are learning it. We can help each other, not as master and servant, not as native and visitor, as neighbors, as partners. Charlie Park stepped forward. The man who had once voted for their provisional stay now stood with a different bearing. His earlier suspicion was gone, replaced by a blunt honesty. He looked at Sarah, then at her children. "Your children saved this colony," he said. The words were not gentle. They were a hammer strike, a fact laid bare for everyone to hear. They fought for us. They used skills we don't have. They turned a battle we were losing into a victory. We owe them. We owe you. He turned to face the council, to face the colonists. I move we grant them permanent residency, full rights, full membership, not as a charity, as a partnership. They have proven their value. They have earned their place. The vote was called. Hands were raised. There was no discussion, no debate. The decision was clear. Every hand went up. Maria Santos's was the last. Her face was tight, but her hand rose. She met Sarah's eyes for a second, then looked away. The motion passed, unanimous. The formalities were done. The meeting broke up. People began to move back to their duties. But something had shifted. The line between neighbor and family had blurred. It was in the way Martha Chen handed Noah a new seedling for the hydro bays. It was in the way a mechanic asked Sophie to look at a faulty compressor. It was in the way Torres nodded to Sarah, a gesture of respect between equals. They were no longer us and them. They were just us. The community had expanded. It was stronger for it. The circle that began with a request for scraps in a dark clearing was now complete. They were home. Life found a new rhythm in the colony. The days settled into a pattern of shared work and shared meals. The tension didn't vanish. It just changed shape. The old mindset, survive first, ask questions later, was challenged daily. It was a quiet shift, a slow turning. People who once hoarded information now shared it. Those who guarded their skills now taught them. The colony was rebuilding itself, not with new walls but with new principles. Sarah's understanding of the land proved vital immediately. A mining team was preparing to drill a new shaft in the eastern ridge. They had scanned the rock. It looked stable. Sarah walked the site. She ran her hand over the stone. She tasted the air. She pointed to a faint seam in the rock face. "The water runs close here," she said. "The vibrations will fracture the ceiling. The tunnel will flood." The engineers checked her claim with deeper sensors. She was right. An underground river flowed just meters below the planned excavation. A potential disaster was averted with a simple observation. Her knowledge, born from generations on this world, became part of the planning process. Emily's diplomacy moved beyond the Telvar. She initiated contact with the reclusive Kathva, a species known for their territorial aggression. She didn't go with weapons or gifts. She went with a proposal for shared hunting grounds. She spoke their complex language, her voice calm. She acknowledged their claims. She offered a fair division of resources. After 3 days of negotiation, a treaty was signed. The eastern valleys, once a no-man's land of skirmishes, became a zone of managed harvest. The colony gained safe access to rich hunting. The Kathava gained assurance their territory would be respected. Peace was secured not by force but by careful words. Sophie's mind was a constant engine of improvement. The colony's power grid was functional but inefficient. Energy was wasted at every step. She redesigned the conduits, rerouting power from non-essential systems during peak usage. She salvaged components from old comms equipment to build better regulators. The lights didn't flicker during high demand. The energy signature of the entire colony dropped by 18%. Her fixes were simple, elegant. They used what was already there, just arranged better. The power core ran cooler. The reserves lasted longer. Noah's work in the hydro bays transformed their food supply. He identified a native fungus that was stunting the growth of their grain crops. He introduced a companion plant, a hardy Keplerian root that secreted a compound which inhibited the fungus. He adjusted the nutrient cycles to match the planet's slightly longer day. The results were undeniable. The wilted plants recovered. The first harvest after his changes yielded twice the food. The storage silos, usually half empty before winter, were filled to capacity. The constant anxiety about rations began to fade. Liam's talent for order found its purpose in the supply sheds. He created a new logging system. Every tool, every spare part, every box of rations was tracked. He color-coded the shelves. He implemented a checkout procedure that was simple and fast. The constant problem of missing items vanished. The quartermaster knew exactly what they had and where it was. This precision rippled outward. Repair jobs were completed faster because the right part was on hand. Meal planning became more accurate because the food stores were reliably known. Waste decreased. Efficiency increased. Collaboration was no longer a charitable idea. It was a strategic advantage. The colony was stronger because it was more diverse. It had more tools to solve problems. More eyes to see danger. More hands to do the work. They were not just scraping by, enduring each day and hoping for the next. They were building. They were improving. They were thriving. The struggle for survival had become a foundation for something better. The community was no longer defined by what it lacked, but by what its members could do together. The community meeting felt different this time. The air was calm. No winter wind. No tension humming like a live wire. People sat on crates and worn benches. They talked in low voices about crops and repairs. The crisis was over. The work continued. Maria Santos stood at the back for a long time. Her hands were clasped tight. She watched the room. She watched Sarah and her children sitting with Jack near the front. They were part of the fabric now. A thread woven in. Finally, she stepped forward. She asked for the floor. The room went quiet. All eyes turned to her. They expected another argument. A final stand about resources or security. A last grasp at the old fear. Her posture was rigid. Her face was pale. She looked at the council table. She did not look at the crowd. She did not justify herself. She did not explain her reasons. She simply said 3 words. "I was wrong." The sentence hung in the quiet room. It was a simple statement. It carried the weight of all her previous speeches, all her accusations. She spoke of fear. Her voice was low, but it carried to every corner. "I let it blind me," she said. She didn't look at anyone. Her gaze was fixed on some point on the far wall. I saw mouths to feed. I saw a risk to our safety. I did not see children. I did not see neighbors. Her words were plain, unadorned. There was no plea for forgiveness in them, only a stark admission. Her eyes finally moved. They settled on the family, on Sophie, on Noah, on Liam, on Emily. I see contribution now, she said. Her voice grew firmer, not consumption. I see skills we need, courage we rely on. I see a part of this colony that makes it stronger. She turned to face the council fully, her shoulders straightened. The moment of weakness was gone, replaced by a new resolve. I move we grant them full citizenship, she said. Her voice was clear. Not provisional status. Not conditional membership. Full and permanent. They have earned it. We were wrong to withhold it, she sat down. The silence in the room was absolute. No one spoke. No one needed to. The vote was called. Hands began to rise. Slowly at first, then all together. There was no discussion, no debate. The sheriff raised his hand. Martha Chen raised hers. The mechanics from the repair bay. The botanists from the hydro farms. Every hand in the room went up. The measure passed. Not a single vote against it. The transformation was complete. The last barrier was gone. It had not fallen to a fight or a demand. It had fallen to a simple, difficult truth spoken aloud. The community was whole. Not in spite of its differences, but because of them. The meeting ended. People went back to their work. The silence was comfortable now. It was the silence of a job finished. A wound finally healed. The shared meal was quiet. Steam rose from the bowls. The smell of warm grain and cooked vegetables filled the small room. Jack sat at the table with Sarah and her children. He was Jack now, not Mr. Miller. The title of distance was gone. The silence around the table wasn't empty. It was full. A comfortable space built on shared hardship and earned trust. No one needed to fill it with words. The simple act of eating together was enough. He looked at their faces in the lamplight. Emily carefully cutting her food. Sophie discussing a power relay with Noah. Liam listening, his head tilted. Sarah's calm presence at the head of the table. This was his place. He had built a life on Kepler around a simple principle. Your survival is your own responsibility. Protect your food. Guard your shelter. Trust no one. That life was a series of locked doors and calculated risks. He had been good at it. A skilled hunter, a solitary survivor. That life felt small now. It was a narrow path walked alone. The horizon was always close. Every decision was about the next meal, the next threat, the next sunrise. It was a life of counting what you had and fearing what you might lose. He saw its emptiness clearly, sitting at this table. The silence of his own quarters had been a void. The silence here was a presence. It was the sound of belonging. His hand had gone to his knife that first day. His instinct had been to report them. To follow the protocol designed to keep him safe. To protect his own. That instinct felt foreign to him now. A relic from a different man. He was no longer just a protector of self. His focus had expanded. His responsibility had grown. He was a guardian now. His eyes scanned the room not for his own exit, but for their safety. His ears listened for threats to their peace. His planning included their needs. His choice in the clearing seemed simple then. A moment of pity. A shared meal. It was the first step on a path he couldn't see. It led him here. To a full table. To a new name. To a purpose that was larger than his own heartbeat. He had learned that protecting only yourself is a hollow kind of survival. It keeps you breathing, but it doesn't let you live. True survival, the kind that means something, is found in protecting others. It is in the strength of a community. The safety of a family. The shared responsibility for a future that is bigger than any one person. He had found that the highest form of survival wasn't about hoarding. It was about building. And he was finally building something that would last. Kepler's twin suns dipped below the horizon, their fading light stretching the colony's shadows into long, cool shapes. The day's final tasks were complete. Tools were put away. Doors were secured. The air held the quiet of earned rest. The memory of fear was there, a faint echo like a scar that no longer aches but is still known. It was a part of them now, a chapter in their shared story, not a present danger. Inside the small living area, Emily sat with her siblings. The day's tension had left their faces. Their postures were relaxed. She began to sing. The words were in her native tongue, the sounds soft and flowing, unlike the harsher tones of the colonists' speech. The melody was simple, a gentle rise and fall that filled the quiet space. It was a lullaby from a world far from this one, carried across the stars in memory. Jack listened from the doorway. He did not understand the language. The words were a mystery, but the melody was not. It carried a feeling he recognized. It spoke of quiet courage. It spoke of kindness offered without expectation. It was a story told in notes and rhythm, not in sentences. He could hear the narrative in the rise and fall of her voice. A tale of hardship, a journey through darkness, the arrival of help from unexpected places, strangers who saw need and chose to become protectors. This was how cultures truly merged. Not through treaties or official decrees, not through forced integration. It happened through these small, quiet acts, through shared meals, through stories sung in the dark, through the passing down of memory from one generation to the next. Even when that generation was far from home, it was in the preservation of a song that held a people's history and values, a lifeline to an identity that refused to be erased by displacement or fear. He leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed. He watched the children's faces as they listened to their sister. Their eyes were heavy with sleep, but they were listening. They were learning their own history, reframed by recent events. Their story was now also his story. The lullaby was weaving them all together, its melody a thread connecting past and present, their people and his. The simplest act had been the most transformative. A question asked in a clearing. A request for leftover food. It had not required advanced technology or great strength. It had required only a moment of shared humanity. A choice to see need and respond to it. That single decision had set everything in motion. It had redirected the fate of 4 children, a solitary man, and an entire colony. It proved that the most powerful force on any frontier was not weaponry or resources, but the basic human impulse to care for one another. The song ended. The last note hung in the air, then faded into the night silence. The children were asleep. The universe outside was vast and cold, a place that could kill without thought or reason. But in this small room, kinship had created a home. It was a shield against the darkness, built not from metal or energy, but from trust, shared sacrifice, and the quiet courage to offer your leftovers to a stranger. True danger on any frontier isn't the alien landscape or unknown creatures. It's the instinct to shut down, to turn inward, to fear what's different. Jack almost followed that path. His knife was out, the law was clear, but he saw their hunger. A simple choice to share unwanted food became the colony's salvation. The most advanced survival tool isn't a weapon or a shield. It's compassion. The willingness to look past fear and see a shared need. Next time you assess your resources, your safety, your walls, ask what you might gain by opening them. A wave of blinding white light erupted along the eastern fence. It wasn't just bright, it was a physical shock of pure energy. The HFY warriors recoiled as one. Their night vision, a key biological advantage, was instantly overloaded. They stumbled, clawing at their eyes. Their perfect formations wavered. The coordinated advance faltered into a confused, disoriented mass. The sudden flash gave the defenders a precious moment to regroup. Noah and Liam were already at the comm station. They bypassed the standard channels, accessing the full public address system. They didn't broadcast orders or warnings. They weaponized sound itself. A barrage of chaotic audio flooded every speaker on the perimeter. It was a calculated sensory assault. Emergency alarm sirens wailed at maximum volume. The grinding shriek of malfunctioning machinery cut through the night. Then came the false commands broadcast in the HFY's own guttural language. Contradictory orders. Warnings of flanking attacks that didn't exist. Reports of their leader's death. The cacophony was deafening. It shattered the HFY's auditory signals. Their communication, which relied on precise vocal commands from their war leader, dissolved into meaningless noise. Warriors turned on the spot, unable to hear instructions. Some charged forward. Others fell back. Their disciplined ranks broke into isolated, confused pockets. The unity that was their greatest strength was gone, replaced by chaos. On the ridge, the HFY war leader watched his assault unravel. His sharp hand signals were useless. His shouted commands were lost in the audio storm. His warriors were blind, deaf, and leaderless. They moved erratically, some colliding with each other. The colonists, seizing the opportunity, pressed their advantage. Their fire became focused, effective. The HFY line broke, The war leader made a final furious gesture, the signal for a full immediate retreat. His forces disengaged, pulling back from the fence in a disorderly scramble. They left their dead and wounded behind. The coordinated invasion had become a frantic escape. The perimeter held. The attack was over. The sudden silence felt heavier than the noise that had preceded it. The only sounds were the moans of the wounded and the crackle of damaged equipment. Colonists stood at their posts, breathing hard, their weapons still raised. They looked at the retreating shadows, then back toward the command center. They had been saved. Not by superior firepower or stronger defenses. They had been saved by a power surge and a noise machine, by a defense they could never have conceived. They had been saved by the children. The ones they had feared, the ones some had wanted to expel. They stood in the aftermath, surrounded by the evidence of their victory, and the unspoken question hung in the air. Who had protected whom? The silence after the battle felt heavier than the noise. Colonists moved through the compound, assessing damage. A few scorch marks on the perimeter wall, some damaged sensors, one irrigation line severed. The physical toll was light. No colonist deaths, a few minor injuries. The real damage had been to their certainty, their understanding of who they were, who they protected. Who protected them? People looked at the children differently now. The sideways glances were gone. The whispered debate stopped. When Sophie walked past the repaired irrigation pump, a mechanic nodded to her. Not a full smile, but an acknowledgement. When Noah checked the hydroponics bay, the botanist asked his opinion on a new seedling. The fear had burned away in the fight. What remained was a quiet respect. They were no longer the blue-skinned refugees. They were the ones who had saved the power grid. The ones who had broken the enemy's coordination. They were neighbors. They were guardians. Charlie Park called a meeting in the square, the same space where Maria Santos had rallied fear days before. He stood on the same crate. His voice carried in the cold air. "We were wrong," he said. The words were simple, direct. We judged them by what they might take. We didn't see what they could give. He looked at the children standing near Jack. They didn't just fight for us. They fought with a wisdom we don't have. They see this world differently. That difference saved us. He wasn't making a speech. He was stating a new fact. The social contract had been rewritten. Trust wasn't about shared origin anymore. It was about shared action, shared survival. Your value was not in your bloodline. It was in what you did for the community. This became the new currency. The only one that mattered on the frontier. Maria Santos stood at the back of the crowd. She said nothing. Her arms were crossed. Her earlier arguments about resources and risk lay hollow. You couldn't call someone a drain when they had just saved your power grid. You couldn't call them a threat when they had just turned back an invasion. Her silence was louder than any protest. It was an admission. The facts had overruled fear. The provisional stay was never mentioned again. No one brought up the 30-day evaluation. Their place was earned. It was settled. The vote to grant them permanent residency would be a formality now. The community had already decided with its actions, with its nods, with its quiet thanks, but one question remained. It hung in the air, unspoken but felt by everyone. The children had a mother, Sarah. She was still out there, somewhere. Her absence was the last piece of the puzzle. The colony was whole, but their family was not. The fight was over, but the search was just beginning. The real test of their new unity would not be defending against an enemy. It would be risking everything to bring one of their own home. Sheriff Torres came back at dusk. His rover's engine groaned from a hard run. He stepped out, his face rigid. Dust coated his uniform. The usual ease in his posture was gone. He moved to the command shed. Jack and the children were there going over supply lists. Torres didn't sit. He just looked at them. His silence said more than words. "I found a camp," he said. His voice was flat. "Eastern Territories. High ground overlooking the dry river." He described the place. High fences topped with wire. Guard towers spaced every 50 meters. Armed patrols walking the perimeter. A man named Marcus Dre ran it. A known name on the frontier. A trafficker. A slaver Torres had watched through binoculars for 2 days. He saw the workers. Their movements were slow, deliberate. Not lazy, exhausted. Guards watched every motion. Punishment was quick, brutal. The place was designed to break people, to crush any thought of resistance, any hope of escape. Then he saw her. A woman with the same blue skin, the same silver patterns on her temples. She was thinner than the others. Her shoulders were stooped, but her eyes were still alert, still searching. It was Sarah, alive, imprisoned. A rescue was possible, but it was a bad idea, a suicide run. The camp was a fortress. The terrain offered little cover. Dre's guards were well-armed, well-disciplined. Getting in would be hard. Getting out with a weakened prisoner would be harder. The odds were against them. Heavier than any winter storm, Emily stood. "I'm going." Her voice was quiet but absolute. There was no question in it. This was her mother, her family, her responsibility. Jack shook his head. No, absolutely not. His hand went to her shoulder, not to comfort, to stop her. "It's too dangerous. You're a child. You stay here where it's safe." She didn't shrug him off. She met his eyes. "Your maps are wrong," she said. Her tone was factual, not emotional. "The river isn't dry. It runs underground there. The rock is limestone. It's full of caves and old tunnels. My people use them for shelter during the seasonal storms. Dre doesn't know they exist. His sensors won't show them. I know the way in. I know the way out." She wasn't arguing. She was stating a tactical advantage. Her knowledge wasn't a child's fantasy. It was a soldier's intelligence. Jack looked from her determined face to Torres's grim one. The sheriff gave a slow nod. She was right. Their maps were incomplete. The colony surveys missed the subterranean details. A new plan began to form in the dusty shed. Not a frontal assault. Not a direct confrontation. An infiltration. Use the land itself. Use the knowledge Dre didn't have. Human force would provide the muscle, the weapons, the numbers. Alien insight would provide the path, the stealth, the surprise. It was a terrible risk, but it was the only shot they had. Torres started sketching a rough map on the table. Jack added defensive positions. Emily pointed to a spot near the northern fence. "The entrance is here," she said, hidden by scree. "It leads under the wire." The mission was no longer a suicide run. It was a calculated gamble. Their only card was a child's memory of the land. The team moved under a moonless sky. Sheriff Torres led, his rifle held low. Jack followed, his eyes scanning the dark. Emily walked between them, a small figure in the gloom. She didn't carry a weapon. Her knowledge was their greatest asset. She moved with a quiet certainty, her steps sure on the rough ground. "Miller." Torres's voice was low, carrying in the morning quiet. "Heard you brought in visitors." He didn't ask it like a question. His gaze was steady, taking in the situation without surprise. Colony security had eyes everywhere. Someone had talked. Or sensors had picked up the unauthorized life signs. Jack met his look. Their kids, Elias, 4 of them, alone. He kept his own hands visible, relaxed at his sides. This wasn't a fight. Not yet. Torres's jaw tightened. "Kids we don't know. From a species we've never classified. You know the rules." His tone was matter-of-fact, drained of emotion. "They're a biorisk, a security liability. Winter's coming. Our stores are calculated for our own, not extras." "They're starving," Jack said. His voice stayed even, but he could feel the tension coiling in his shoulders. "They asked for food scraps. Not weapons. Not shelter. Leftovers. And you gave them a shed." Torres's eyes narrowed. "How long have they been on world? Where's their group? Their ship?" Every question leads to more risk. More drain on resources we don't have. Before Jack could answer, the shed door opened. Emily stepped out. She moved calmly, her back straight, her hands held loosely at her sides. The morning light caught the silver patterns on her skin. She stopped a few paces from the sheriff, her pale eyes meeting his without hesitation. "We are alone," she said. Her voice was clear, her words precise. She didn't sound afraid. She sounded like she was reading from a report. "Our mother is missing. We are children. We mean no harm." Torres watched her, his expression unreadable. "You understand the situation," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Emily replied. "You fear what you do not know. You have limited food, limited safety. You wonder if we bring disease. Or danger." She didn't flinch. She stated each concern as if listing facts. "We have nowhere else to go. We ask only for a chance to be seen. Not as aliens. As children." The sheriff was silent for a long moment. His eyes moved from Emily to Jack, then back to the shed door where the other 3 now stood watching, their small figures silhouetted against the dim interior. He let out a slow breath, the steam curling in the cold air. I can't make this call alone, he said finally. I'll bring it to the council. Let them debate it. Public meeting. Tonight. He looked at Jack. You vouch for them. That means your standing is on the line too. Then his gaze returned to Emily. If the council says leave, you leave. No argument, Emily nodded. We understand. Torres turned without another word and walked back toward the colony center. His footsteps faded on the gravel. Jack watched him go, then looked at Emily. Her composure didn't break, but her shoulders relaxed just slightly. The conversation had started. Now they had to survive the debate. The council chamber felt close, the air thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and cold fear. Every seat was taken. Colonists stood along the walls, their faces tight with worry. Winter was a real thing here, a constant pressure. Every calorie counted. Every mouth to feed was a risk. The council members sat at a long table, their data slates glowing in the dim light. Maria Santos spoke first. Her voice cut through the murmur. We have protocols for a reason. Unknown species. Unknown diseases. Our medical bay can't handle a new pathogen. Our food reserves are calculated down to the gram. We take them in, we all starve together. She looked around the room, her gaze hard. Remember the last contact? The Baron traders. They seemed peaceful too. Then the fever took 12 of ours. A man near the back nodded. She's right. My kids don't eat good intentions. They eat food. Food we don't have to spare. Then Martha Chen stood. She ran the hydroponics bay. Her hands were stained with soil and nutrients. They are children, she said. Her voice was quieter, but it carried. They're alone. If they were human kids, we wouldn't be having this debate. We'd already have them in the mess hall. Fear is a luxury we can't afford if it makes us monsters. The room erupted. Voices overlapped, arguments flying. Fear against compassion. Pragmatism against morality. It was an old fight on a new world. Jack stood near the door, his arms crossed. He said nothing. His presence was his argument. Then a small figure moved through the crowd. Emily walked to the front. She had to stand on a crate to reach the microphone. The room went quiet. All eyes were on the small blue-skinned girl. They expected pleading, tears, and emotional appeal. She gave them none of that. Her voice was calm, clear, and utterly matter-of-fact. I understand your concerns, she said. You see 4 more mouths to feed. I propose you see 4 more pairs of hands. She looked at the council, then at the colonists. My sister Sophie understands mechanical systems. She can repair what your engineers have given up on. My brother Noah has knowledge of xenobotany. Your hydroponics are failing because you are using the wrong nutrient mix for Kepler's sunlight. He can fix that. She continued, her tone neutral like she was listing inventory. Liam is skilled with logistics and organization. Your supply chains are inefficient. I can communicate with the native species that avoid your scouts. They have resources you need. We do not ask for charity. We offer a trade, sanctuary for labor, safety for utility. She stepped down. The silence in the room was complete. She had reframed the entire debate. They were no longer a burden to be carried. They were a potential asset to be utilized. The council head looked at his fellow members. They spoke in low tones for a few minutes. The tension in the room was a live wire. Finally, he turned back. Provisional stay. 30 days. You will be assigned tasks. Your work will be evaluated. Your food will come from your contribution, not our reserves. If you fail to meet utility, you leave. No second chances. The gavel came down. The meeting was over. The clock was now ticking. 30 days to prove they were worth the risk. Jack watched as Emily walked back through the crowd, her head held high. She had bought them time. Now they had to earn their place. The colony watched. Every move the children made was noted. Sideways glances followed them through the mess hall. Whispers trailed them in the corridors. The 30-day clock was ticking. They had promised work. Now they had to deliver. Sophie found the broken irrigation pump on her 3rd day. It was in the north field, abandoned by the maintenance crew. They said it was beyond repair. She spent 2 hours examining the mechanism. Her small fingers traced fluid lines and power conduits. She gathered scrap parts from the recycling pile. A length of polymer tubing, a salvaged pressure gauge, a few discarded seals. She worked without speaking, her focus absolute. By afternoon, water flowed through the lines again. The dry soil drank it in. Martha Chen checked the readings twice, then nodded once. No thanks. Just acknowledgement. Noah walked the hydroponics bays with a quiet intensity. The leafy greens were wilting, their edges browning. The colony's botanist had tried everything. Standard nutrient mixes, adjusted light cycles. Nothing worked. Noah crouched, touched a drooping leaf. He didn't need sensors, he knew. He pointed to the nutrient tanks. "The balance is wrong for this star's light," he said. His voice was soft. "Too much nitrogen. Not enough potassium for the blue spectrum." He suggested a new mixture. The botanist scoffed but tried it. Within 2 days, the plants perked up. The brown spots faded. A critical crop was saved. Liam took over the supply logs. They were a mess. Inventory lists didn't match physical stock. Shipments were logged late or not at all. He sat at a terminal, his small face lit by the screen. He cross-referenced delivery manifests with consumption rates. He created a new system, simple, clear. Every item had a place. Every movement was recorded. The quartermaster found he could actually track their reserves for the first time. Waste dropped. Efficiency climbed. The boy didn't say a word. He just made the numbers make sense. Emily went to the perimeter gate alone. The guards watched her, hands on their weapons. Beyond the fence, the reclusive Telvar watched back. They were a shy species, all limbs and large eyes. They traded rarely and only for specific items. Colony scouts had never managed more than a few tense exchanges. Emily stood in the open, making no sudden moves. She didn't speak their language. She used hand signals, a series of gestures for trade, for friendship, for mutual need. After an hour, one of the Telvar approached. By evening, they had an agreement. Medicines for rare minerals the colony's fabricators needed. A deal scouts had failed to get in a year, she secured in a single afternoon. Small acts, quiet competence. The wall of fear didn't collapse. It eroded, day by day. Fixed pump, saved plants, organized shelves. A successful trade. The sideways glances became nods. The whispers became quiet observations. They were no longer just the blue-skinned refugees. They were the girl who fixed things, the boy who understood plants, the quiet one who organized the storeroom, the one who could talk to the Telvar. They were contributors. Their food came from their labor, not from charity. But outside the colony walls, the air grew colder. The sky took on the hard, clear quality of deep winter. The 30-day evaluation was not the true test. The true test was the season. Food stocks were still perilously low. Contributions could keep them fed. But could they keep everyone alive when the real cold came? The work was building trust, but winter didn't bargain. It just took. The cold came early. A sharp wind cut through the colony, whispering of lean months ahead. Maria Santos stood on an empty storage crate in the central square, her breath pluming in the air. A crowd gathered around her, their faces pinched with winter anxiety. She didn't shout. Her voice carried anyway, cold and clear. "They are not children," she said. The words hung in the frosty air. "They are scouts, sent to weaken us before the main force arrives." She pointed toward the maintenance sector where the children worked. "They fix our machines. They learn our weaknesses. They tend our plants. They study our food sources. They organize our supplies. They map our vulnerabilities," the crowd murmured. Heads nodded. Fear was a familiar tool here. It needed little fuel to burn. 2 ration packs went missing from the long-term storage. Maria continued. Her eyes scanned the faces before her. "Who took them?" "We all know. They eat our food while we tighten our belts. They smile while we count our calories. Winter is coming. Will you starve to feed aliens?" The mood shifted. The anxiety about scarce resources found a target. The crowd's energy turned hard, focused. People who had nodded at the children days before now glared toward their quarters. Suspicion became anger. Anger sought an outlet. Sheriff Torres moved to the edge of the crowd. His hand rested on his stun prod. "Break it up," he said. His voice was firm, but the crowd didn't disperse. They were too many. Their fear was a thicker barrier than any law. "This is colony business," a man yelled. "Not sheriff business," others joined in. The voices rose, overlapping. Demands for expulsion. Accusations of theft. Words like spies and invasion were thrown like stones. Torres stood his ground, but the crowd pressed closer. The situation balanced on a knife's edge. One push, one thrown object. It would become violence. Then a path opened through the crowd. Emily walked through it. Her siblings followed close behind her. They stopped a few paces from Maria's crate. The crowd fell silent, watching. Emily looked at the faces around her. She saw the fear, the anger, the hard lines of people protecting what little they had. She didn't plead. She didn't argue. She simply nodded. "If the community believes we are a danger," she said, her voice carrying in the sudden quiet, "we will leave." She looked at Maria, then at the sheriff. "Our safety is not worth your unity. Your survival comes first. That is the rule of frontier life. We understand this." She turned and began walking back the way she came, her siblings falling in behind her. The crowd parted for them, their anger confused by the sudden lack of resistance. The immediate threat was gone. The tension drained from the square, leaving behind a cold, uneasy quiet. Maria Santos watched them go, her argument unfinished. She had won the confrontation but lost the moment. The sheriff lowered his hand from his weapon. The crowd began to disperse, muttering amongst themselves. The children returned to their shed. The lock clicked shut behind them. The immediate crisis had passed, but the fear remained. The division was still there, buried just beneath the surface. The underlying conflict was not resolved. It was only waiting. The first alarm screamed, a harsh electronic wail cutting through the night. Then another. The perimeter sensors lit up, a swarm of red dots converging on the eastern fence line. The Cathvar came without warning. Their assault began with coordinated predatory precision. They moved in tight formations, a wave of dark shapes against the starry sky. The colony's defenders scrambled to the walls, pulse rifles humming to life. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness. The Cathvar didn't break stride. They used the terrain, moving from cover to cover with practiced ease. Their weapons were simpler than the colony's energy weapons: spears, bladed clubs, short bows, but they used them with brutal efficiency. A colonist went down, then another. The defensive line wavered. They were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. From a ridge overlooking the battle, the Cathvar war leader directed the assault. He stood perfectly still, a figure of terrifying calm amidst the chaos. Elaborate decorations adorned his spear, marking his rank. His signals were subtle, a raised hand, a sharp gesture. Each movement sent his warriors flowing into new positions, exploiting weaknesses in the colony's defense. The colonists fought back, but their responses were reactive, disjointed. They were holding the line through sheer determination, but they were losing ground. The Cathvar fought as a single organism, their movements perfectly synchronized. The children were not in the shelters. They stood on a raised walkway near the command post, watching the battle unfold. Their faces were intent, their large eyes tracking the patterns of the attack. They saw what the panicked colonists did not. Emily's gaze was fixed on the war leader. She saw how his warriors looked to him for every command. Their coordination was their greatest strength, and its source was that single, still figure on the ridge. Their entire strategy relied on clear communication and disciplined ranks. She turned to her siblings, speaking quickly in their own soft language. Her hands moved, sketching shapes in the air, the power grid, the comms array, the Cathvar formations. She wasn't suggesting a stronger defense. She was proposing a different kind of fight. Not meeting force with force, but attacking the enemy's ability to function. Disrupt the signals. Shatter the coordination. Turn their greatest strength into a fatal weakness. Sophie nodded, her fingers already moving as if tracing circuits only she could see. Noah and Liam listened, their expressions focused. The plan was formed in seconds, a product of a different way of thinking. They didn't see a battle. They saw a system and they identified the pressure points. Emily found Jack near the western barricade, his rifle stock tight against his shoulder. "Their leader controls them with sound and signal," she said, her voice calm amid the gunfire. "They listen for his commands. They watch his movements. If we break that connection, they break." Jack looked from her to the ridge, to the Cathvar moving with machine-like precision. He saw the truth in it. Their strength was also a fragile chain. Sever one link and the whole thing falls apart. He keyed his calm. "Torres' new plan. We're not shooting the soldiers. We're blinding and deafening them. The kids have an idea." The sheriff's response was a burst of static, then a terse, "Do it." The colony's survival now hinged on alien tactics, on a defense built not on strength but on disruption. Sophie ran for the command center. Her small hands flew across the power grid controls. She bypassed the main safeties, rerouting energy through the secondary generators. The screens flickered. Warning lights flashed red across the board. She ignored them. Her focus was absolute. She channeled a massive surge into the outer perimeter lighting system. The lighting arrays were never meant to handle that much raw power. The silence broke with a whisper. "Can we have your leftovers?" 4 blue-skinned children emerged from the shadows, their eyes pale like a perfect sky. Jack Miller, a seasoned survivor on Kepler, had just fought off predators, now faced a choice harder than any hunt. Help them or report them to a colony that fears aliens. His knife still dripped with blood, but their hunger cut deeper. Jack wiped his knife clean on his pants leg. The blue-furred predator lay still at his feet, its 6 limbs splayed awkwardly in death. He'd been tracking this one for 3 days. Meat meant survival. Hides meant trade goods. The colony's rations never stretched far enough this close to winter. He started field dressing the carcass, his movements efficient from long practice. Blood stained the yellow grass dark. His thoughts were on smoked meat and how many credits the hide might bring. 4 small shadows detached themselves from the deeper darkness beneath the trees. They moved with a silence that put his own tracking skills to shame. Jack's hand went to his knife again, fingers closing on the still damp grip. He turned slowly, every sense alert. They were children, or something like children. Their skin held a faint blue luminescence like the deep ice of Kepler's northern glaciers. Large, pale eyes watched him without blinking. The tallest one, a girl, took half a step forward. Her voice was clear but hesitant, as if shaping unfamiliar words. "Can we have your leftovers?" Leftovers. The parts he would normally discard. Entrails, organs, less desirable cuts. Things a human wouldn't eat unless starving. Their frames were thin beneath simple woven clothing. Jack could count the ribs on the smallest one. Their hunger was a physical presence in the clearing, sharp as the smell of blood. Colony protocol flashed through his mind. Standard procedure. Unknown aliens, possible biohazard, potential threat. Report immediately. Isolate. His thumb ran along the edge of his blade. These weren't warriors or infiltrators. They were kids asking for scraps. The girl's eyes held his. They were the color of a clear sky just after dawn. In them he saw no weapon, no strategy, no hidden agenda. Only a deep and weary need that mirrored something in himself he'd buried long ago. The constant calculation of survival, yours against theirs, faltered. His hand loosened on the knife. The metal slid back into its sheath with a soft click. He nodded toward the carcass. "Take what you need." They moved forward, not rushing but with a focused intensity. Their small hands were deft as they gathered the organs he'd set aside. They didn't cook them, just ate with a quiet urgency that spoke of real hunger. Jack watched, his own meal forgotten. He'd made his choice. The rules said report them. His instincts said feed them. Tonight at least they would eat. He led them to the old processing warehouse at the colony's edge. The air inside smelled of dust and stale coolant. Jack pulled ration bars from his pack, the kind every colonist carried for emergencies. He broke them into pieces, handed them out. No one spoke at first. They just ate. The oldest girl took each portion with a quiet, "Thank you." Her voice held a formal tone like someone reciting a learned phrase. She passed shares to the others, 2 boys, 1 younger girl. They didn't chew fast. They ate with a slow, focused intensity that made the simple food seem like a feast. Their eyes never left his hands. Jack watched their delicate features. Their skin had that same faint blue glow he'd seen outside, like light through deep ice. Fine silver patterns traced their temples almost like circuitry. Up close he saw they weren't human. Not even close. Their fingers were slender with an extra joint. Their ears tapered to subtle points. "I'm Jack," he said. The girl nodded. She placed one hand over her heart. "Emily." She gestured to the others in turn. "Sophie. Noah. Liam." Each child gave a small, formal bow of the head. Their names sounded human enough, but the cadence was off. Learned words for dealing with colonists. He looked at their thin faces. The question was obvious, necessary. "Where are your parents?" The words hung in the dusty air. For a second, Emily's composed mask slipped. Her shoulders tightened. Her eyes darted toward the younger ones, then back to him. The silence stretched. She drew a slow breath. "Our mother is missing." Her voice stayed calm, but her hands clenched slightly at her sides. "Her name is Sarah. She went to trade at the outpost near the eastern ridge. She did not return." Jack knew that place. Everyone did. It was a rough spot where colony law didn't reach, a known danger zone for anyone, let alone an alien trader. Emily's composure returned, but the worry stayed in her eyes. We have been waiting. 7 days. 7 days alone out here. 4 kids surviving on whatever they could scavenge. No wonder they'd approached him for scraps. This wasn't just hunger. It was a chain of bad decisions leading to disaster. Jack looked at their tired faces. The blue glow of their skin seemed fainter in the dim light, like a failing power cell. He'd thought he was just handing out some extra meat. Now he was involved. A missing mother. A dangerous location. 4 children who'd been alone too long. The warehouse felt colder suddenly. The reality settled on him. This wasn't a chance meeting. It was a crisis in motion, and he'd just stepped into the middle of it. His hand went to the comm unit on his belt. He could still call it in, report unknown aliens, let the colony handle it. But he saw the way Emily watched him. She knew what he was thinking. Her posture was straight, but her fingers trembled slightly. She was holding it together for the others, being the adult when she was just a kid herself. He let his hand drop from the comm. Not yet. First, he needed to get them somewhere safer than this dusty warehouse, somewhere they could rest without looking over their shoulders. The Eastern Ridge trading post could wait until morning. For now, the priority was getting these 4 through the night. He took them to an old maintenance shed near the perimeter fence. The padlock was rusted shut. Jack used his knife to pry it open. The door swung inward with a groan of protesting metal. Inside was worse than he remembered. Dust coated every surface. The air smelled of old oil and damp concrete. A single workbench stood against one wall, its surface scarred from years of use. In the far corner, a stack of moldering packing crates offered the only seating. This was breaking at least 3 colony regulations. Harboring unknown aliens, failure to report contact, endangering community security. His fingerprints were on that broken lock now. His boot prints in the dust. No going back from this. He turned to face them. They stood just inside the doorway, 4 pale figures in the gloom. Their blue skin seemed to absorb what little light filtered through the grimy windows. Jack kept his voice low, practical. You stay here. Out of sight. Don't answer the door for anyone but me. He pointed to the windows. Keep these covered. There's blankets in that crate. He nodded toward the stacked boxes. If you see anyone coming, you hide. Under the workbench, behind the crates, anywhere. They listened without moving. Their eyes were fixed on him, taking in every word. Don't talk to anyone. Don't let anyone hear you. If there's trouble, you use this. He pulled a small emergency beacon from his pack. It was meant for signaling rescue in the wilderness. He showed them the button. 1 press if you need help. 2 if you have to run. 3 if it's safe. It was a crude system, but it would work. They nodded. All 4 of them. No questions. No complaints. Their immediate understanding told him more than any scanner could. They'd done this before. They knew about hiding. About danger. The shed was cold. The metal walls would leach heat all night. Jack saw Sophie's breath mist in the air. She moved to the wall near the door, her fingers tracing patterns in the dust. Circuits. Power conduits. Her touch was precise, knowledgeable. She was reading the building's infrastructure like a schematic. Noah crouched by the doorway. A small plant struggled through a crack in the concrete, its leaves brown and wilted. He tilted his head, studying it. His hand hovered near the dying leaves but didn't touch. There was a focus to his stillness that felt older than his years. Jack looked at the space he'd given them. 4 walls, a roof, a lock on the door. It was shelter, but barely. A temporary solution to a problem that needed more than a hiding place. Tomorrow he'd have to make decisions. About the missing mother. About colony authorities. About what happened when temporary became permanent. For now they had a roof. They had a lock on the door. They had rules to follow. The children began moving quietly, pulling dusty blankets from the crates, covering the windows, making the space theirs. Jack stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind him. The broken lock wouldn't hold against any real force, but it would serve as a warning. He stood for a moment in the gathering dark, listening. The only sound was the wind through the perimeter fence. 4 children were safe for the night. What that safety would cost him, he didn't know yet. Sheriff Torres found him at the shed just after sunrise. The lawman's boots crunched on the gravel path, each step measured and deliberate. His expression was flat, his eyes scanning the broken lock, the freshly disturbed dust around the doorframe. He didn't touch his weapon, but his right hand rested near the grip of his stun prod. He looked at Jack, then passed him toward the closed shed door.